about the earliest time one could light his Shabbos candles. And it's actually quite an interesting question. I saw some shitas there that were surprising, some not. So I guess it's worth looking at some of the sources. So I'm going to put the sources on the page, and we'll get right to it. Yeah, I think that this is something that most people are unaware of. But for example, the Achronim make explicit what's implied in the Gemara. Let's say Gemara, Rashi, Rambam. You could come to a conclusion, and we'll see that it's actually kind of there's almost explicit sources that describe it also. So I'll put it on the screen, and we'll have it there. Okay, so here it is, the earliest time to light Shabbos candles. The first issue here we have is in Shabbos Kaf Gimel. And by the way, I found a mistake in at least my printing of Shulchan Aruch. It says you can find this in Shabbos Kaf Dalid. So the Bar Gola says that. So I think that's a mistake. So you might want to fix it. And actually, we were looking at these sugyas a few months ago. We were talking about Shkia and Tzeis and all that. So it talks about the advantages of lighting Shabbos candles. Rav Huna says a person who lights Shabbos candles a lot, that's his mitzvah. So we'll have children who will be scholars, right? And sticking to mezuzah, that's basically what it says here. The Saper b'shefach hadakatni wrote, and also there are people who excelled at this mitzvah, and the other rabbi said, they're going to have children who are going to be great men. It says here that Rav Yosef's wife used to actually delay lighting the Shabbos candles. She really tarried with it. Amar la Rav Yosef Tanya. Rav Yosef told her, it says in the Brisa, or actually a teaching here, brings a pasuk, Lo yamish amud ha'anan yomam amud ha'esh laila. Okay, you'd never have a time when the pillar of cloud or the pillar of fire wasn't there leading the people. It says the pillar of fire was there at night. The pillar of cloud was there in the morning, by day. So it never was. One they took over for each other. He says, Milamed she'amud anan mashlim lamud ha'esh. Amud ha'esh mashlim amud ha'anan. They it's not like there was an absent time. Each one took over for the other. They never left us absent of anything. Okay, one filled in for the other. It means they came and then the other one left. So he was implying to his wife that she should make sure to light the candles before it's actually time to have candles. Just like the Amud Eish, he mentions the Amud Eish came first. The Amud Eish, which was there at night to light the way, it says that's what the Amud Eish was there for, was there to light the way. Mm-hmm. So that showed up while it was yet day. So he's basically implying to his wife, make sure you light your Shabbos candles while it is still daytime. And by the way, you have to, because I understand why the sage would say, make sure to light your Shabbos candles before it's actually sundown, because if not, you're violating Shabbos. Shabbos candles, I guess it's a good hakdama. We're going to see that there's Talmudic precedent for this, but it also became, because of certain sociological issues in our Jewish history, that lighting Shabbos candles became emblematic of observant Judaism. It's the symbol, right? More than Kiddush, more than two challahs, it's the symbol of Shabbos observance throughout the ages. The Moranos, there are people, we know we're Jewish, why we secretly hide Shabbos candles. They're so symbolic. Why? One of the first issues that came up, we're going to see in the Gemara, is that was a sign that Shabbos is starting. It's like the last hachana you could do. Normally, other hachanas take time. So cooking, especially if you're cooking a lot, that takes hours before Shabbos. Lighting a candle, lighting a lamp is a very simple malacha that you usually leave for last. Also because, if you light your candles way too long before Shabbos, they are going to burn out before Shabbos. Basically do them right before the end. And also malacha aspect. So in the times of the Karaites, when that became a thing, the Karaites were opposed to lighting any fires on Shabbos. Remember, that was part of their shtick, was no fire burning a house on Shabbos. So lighting Shabbos candles, dafka, as a sign of accepting Shabbos, became an Orthodox Jewish thing. Later in history, this became something also kind of emblematic. There's Rav Schechter says the mitzvahs that even the non-observant keep, buying Israel bonds, Yizkor, what is it? What are the things? Shabbos candles. I forget what else. Things like that. So Shabbos candles, like I said, they have a certain cultural aspect to them. So
Rabbi was famous for being very heavy on this. Yeah. I mean, he understood very well. It's heavy symbolism.
Yes. So he told her, Amar la hahu saba. Okay. So she thought to do it extra early then. Okay, so I'll do it well before Shabbos. So a certain Saba told her, a certain sage or older man means it's literally Zaken, which means wise person. Tanena, we've also been taught, Uvilvad shelo yakdim v'shelo ya'acher. Just don't do it too early, don't do it too late. Now that's what the Gemara says. Don't light your Shabbos candles too early. Not too late, I understand, because it's a malacha. Not too early. But the sages don't say, they don't give a specific time. So Rashi says over there, and I highlighted this over here, Amud Anon, Amud Ha'anon. It says how Shel Yom Mashlim Oro LaAmud Ha'esh Shel Amud Ha'esh Ba Kodem Sheishka Amud Ha'anon. The Amud Eish would show up before the Amud Anon would, I guess, disappear, set, whatever it is. Alma Orach Ara Bahachi. That's Orach Ara. That's Derech Eretz. It's supposed to be that the lights go on before it's actually time for the lights. And then he says, Lakdume, the Od Hayom Gadol. She thought, okay, right, light, the Od Hayom Gadol. And as it points out, the Gemara doesn't say that. That's what Rashi says. It means while the day is a bit big, like it's clearly daytime. Okay. And Tanena means a brisa, Shoneh Ani, as opposed to my sages teach this. That's what he responded to, is this Saba, who was there with Rav Yosef, who's telling Rav Yosef's wife what to do. Says Shelo Yakdim, the law minkara shehi shel Shabbat. Okay, lighting too early, it's not minkara, and I think that's the ikar what Rashi says here. Minkara, you have to light Shabbos candles in a reasonable amount of time. If you light your Shabbos candles too late, you're violating Shabbos, and then you can't light them. You shouldn't. And if you light them too early, it's not minkara. Now, by the way, we also have to make another preface. Understand this point. They used to light candles every single day. Why did they light candles every single day? Because every night they need candles for light. It's kind of strange now if you think about it, and this will be part of the answer, the key to the answer they're trying to get to, or the conclusion we're trying to get to. Nowadays, the symbolic nature of Shabbos candles is even more so because we don't light candles every night. We have, I walked in here just around sundown. I turned on these lights here, right? And everybody has lights. Candles are much more symbolic. They have actually no function. No one actually uses candlelight anymore, really. You want to be romantic? Fine. I hope you guys aren't,
well, yeah,
taking notes. But even then, they have better things than just lighting a few candles, right?
I think the Rambam suggests that it is mainly symbolic.
Yeah, it's a symbolic, but it's also practical. He also says a practical.
It's symbolic, and the practical thing is kind of can be here.
There is symbolism, but it's also you have to have it. Mm-hmm. It says you have to have it because you can't be tripping over yourself on Shabbos.
Okay? The Rambam says, is it?
Well, you have to. We'll see. Okay. The point is, Rashi's saying, why not too early? The lo minkara. And nowadays, by the way, if you light candles anytime in Chavod Shabbos, just to know, in our situations, if you go over to the Lachter and you light the candles, it's minkara that this is for Shabbos because you don't light candles all year round. The only time you light candles is Erev Shabbos or Yontif or Hanukkah. And when it's Hanukkah, you don't light it that style. You light them at the window or you light them outside. Most of us hopefully light it outside. So that's minkara that it's Hanukkah and not for Shabbos. That's the first issue. A few pages later, let's say Daf Lamed. This is on Daf Lamed Hayamid Beis. You have Rabbah telling Sham'ei. Sham'ei would be his Shamish, right? Rava was telling Shamish, Atun delo kim lechu b'shiura d'Rabbanan. Okay, you're not quite sure what Some people aren't really holding in the shiurim of the rabbis, timing and all that. If you want to turn on the air conditioner, you could do that too, or you could open up your windows. It's a free country, and the air conditioner remote is somewhere around there.
United States used to be one.
Yeah, we mentioned that last week. Now it's the Soviet States of America. Okay, United States of Assyria. For foreigners, for the people living in the United States, it's the Soviet States of America. For those of us who live in Eretz Yisrael and other places that are subject to American imperialism, it's the United States of Assyria. Conquerors who, just going there to mess everything up. Okay, he says, you don't know the Shurim de Rabbanan. Ad Shimsha Aresh Diklei. Once the sun is at the tops of the trees. By the way, what other standard is that? Tops of the trees? Atlush Raga. That's when you should light your candle. You don't know when to light Shabbos candles. Don't wait until the end. You see the sun at the tops of the trees. That's when you should light it. By the way, this is in Bavil. Bavil's not that mountainous, especially where the sages lived. So if you're looking at the horizon and you see a row of palm trees like they have in Iraq, so about that angle of the sky, That's mostly associated with Plag Mincha. This is also the standard the sages described as when you should daven Ne'ilah on a fast day. Fast days that have Ne'ilah. For us, the only example we see practically is Yom Kippur, but that's the same time. And we basically hold around, it's around Plag. Biyoma moon on my. So what do you do when it's dark? So he says, there's a way you look at the chickens, the way the chickens and the ravens behave, and there's a certain type of grass we mentioned here. And then we get to this brisa over here, wherein the sages describe the tekiyas. What would they used to do? It's a Jewish thing. Where you have a Jewish community, they have to tell people Shabbos is approaching. So the Gabayim get out there with the shofros, and they have the first alarm to tell people, guess what? Shabbos is coming. If you're outside the city working the fields, come back in. And it says, the next one they had to tell people, now it's time, last minute preparations. Then the third one, light the candles, right? What?
I thought lighting the candles was the second show.
So it says Shnia Ladlikas in there, but then there's another brisa over here. There's a few versions. We'll see how the Rambam paskins it. Okay, different versions. There's a whole Gemara in Shakatar, which I'm not going to read now, but I'll send it to you.
Okay.
It says Tekiya Shlish is a Silek Habasalik v'hitmin Hamatmin. Silek Habasalik means person closing up shop. Drop the tree scene. Okay, and Hitmin Hamatmin means start. I guess no, that's insulate your cholent. Hold on one second. Insulate the cholent and light your candles. Gives enough time to roast one more small fish or bake one more small piece of bread. By the way, our pitas on the pita machine, they go through the. Have you seen that the assembly line they have for it? It basically is it's a belt that goes. It drops the dough onto a ball of dough onto this belt, and it goes through this chamber that you can see, basically a blowtorch chamber. The pizzas are there for like 5 seconds. It's like the matzahs. Okay, it's really cool. See it? There's a bakery around here in Sharbim. You can go look at there also. Okay, so it's not that much. Tokeal mirio tokeal v'shovet. So you see here, the third tekiah was the one where they do their last thing, and then it's enough time to do a few more malachas, and then they make Shabbos. By the way, shovet doesn't mean and then the sunset, because then they're telling people who are doing these last minute malachas, they're really playing with fire, literally. Okay, they're roasting fish and baking bread, so they're playing with fire literally and figuratively. So you shouldn't do that. So you have here that the point is, candle lighting was one of the last malachas they went for. That's symbolically that's the last one. So we're approaching a point that you shouldn't light too early, and you shouldn't light too late. So I guess we're going to light a little bit before Shabbos, a little bit before. But what's the earliest I could light the Shabbos candles? Rashi said, don't light it when it's too early in the day, because then it's not minkara. Okay, here's what the Rambam says. Hilchos Shabbos. The Rambam first mentions the mitzvah. It's a chova, not a rishus. Remember, and he also says chayv levarich kodem hadlaka. Fine, but there's a chiddush in there. There's quite a lot of, like Gavriel introduced us to this, that the whole idea of brachas on mitzvahs, some claim is a later issue, and also which mitzvahs specifically. I've heard some say that it only became an actual mitzvah with the bracha because of the Karaites. Otherwise, you'd have to have a bracha of all the hachanas you have in your house. What about the hachana to make your bed? The hachana of shining your shoes and grooming yourself and taking a bath for Shabbos and cooking Shabbos food. Do those have brachas? So why does the hadlaka have a bracha specifically? Only hadlakas Shabbos, hadlakas ner Shabbos. I guess to distinguish us from the Karaites. That's a theory I've heard. But you see, there's a bracha here. Okay, so he says here, "Hamalik tzarich la'adlik mi ba'od yom kodem shkiyat hachama." Rambam's rule: you have to light mi ba'od yom. Doesn't say me'od yom gadol, but he says you have to light it on Friday. Right? Still noticeably Friday before the sun sets. And then the Rambam brings this teaching that they had the 3 tekiyas. When they start blowing the third sound, not the alarm, but the tekiya, silek amasalek, hitmin hamatmin, yeliku with honey roth. And then he waited enough time to roast the fish, bake a piece of bread, and then they had the final tekiya. And he says the shlishith is kodem lishkiyat hachama. This third sounding is before sunset. So the Rambam connects the candle lighting time with the last tekiya, which is sometime before sunset. But that doesn't mean it has to be. Let's say you roasted your fish or you finished your job. You didn't have to be one of the Mesilek, Masalek, and Hitmin, and Matmin when the alarm goes off. You could have done it beforehand, right? Yeah, it's very good. So here's what the Torah says. The Torah points out here that you're supposed to, before Chashecha, a man's supposed to remind everybody. What else? Kodem Chashecha, that's another line of Gemara. That's in the Mishnah. Sorry, what does the Mishnah say? Before, what do we say Chashecha was? We prove from the Yerushalmi and other sources. Chashecha is, or Techshach, Techshach and Chashecha are in Rashi land, and the Gemara and Yerushalmi are Shkia. So it says beforehand, to have a suffix, he doesn't know. Shkia is coming up, tells him, Ain Masrin Savadai. It's already a suffix if it's Shkia. And you can't light candles, you can't do anything anymore. And a person should say, before that, what should he do? He should tell everybody what to do. He says here that if you don't know when Shkia is, the Torah says this, you can't do anything after Shkia. Mishenu Baki Bishur Ben Ashmashoth, Yemaher Lahadlik. Yemaher Lahadlik. Hurry up and light before it's Ben Ashmashoth, before Shkia. Ben Ashmashoth starts with Shkia. Kedamar le Rabbah, he has it with a hey here. Rabbah, we had it with an aleph, Rava. He has Rabbah, Larisei, Atun, says Arisei. Oh, maybe I'm getting this wrong here. Atun de lo kim lechu bishira drabanan. Okay, you guys, you don't know. Arisei means his sharecropper. Sham'e means his servant. You don't know exactly when this is. So what do? So when you see the sun at the tops of the trees, that's when you should light the candles. And then he gives the other simanim. Perush be'od hashemesh berosh ha'yilanot. And it says, it gives the example of this grass. If you don't have a chicken, if you don't have any ravens, you don't have other symbols of what's going on. It says there's a type of grass that leans to the east in the morning and leans to the west in the afternoon. Okay? So look at that type of grass. I don't know what type of grass this is, but it does make sense that certain photosynthetic plants would lean toward the sun. Yeah. So they have that, but it's not something you can notice within a few hours. It takes a few days or whatever it is. So I guess some phototropes are really strong. I don't know. So he says that's when you could do it. But basically, what is the Torah mentioning here? The Torah didn't attach a specific time when you could light candles. Also, the Torah over here seems to say that, yeah, this grass will tell you when it's already afternoon. He's being very general. Why am I mentioning all this? Because there are some who would say, basically, there is a limit to how early you can light your Shabbos candles. What is that limit? Anybody want to guess what the limit is? How the earliest you can light your Shabbos candles?
When you can accept Shabbat.
Yes, when you can accept Shabbos. So we're going to see why, which is also known as Plag. Quick syllogism. Why is Plag the earliest one could possibly accept Shabbos?
It's the earliest one can daven Mariv.
It's the earliest one can daven Mariv. And in Chazal's way of thinking, what is the way of accepting Shabbos? According to Chazal, Mariv is Kabbalah Shabbos. They didn't sing Lichadodi, they didn't say Mizmor Shir Yom Shabbos, and it's not Baruch. There are Rishonim who say it's Baruch, but those Rishonim are holding like who? The Manda Omar, which is basically the one that Rabbi Bar-Hayim doesn't like, but is the common practice throughout the entire Jewish world, that when you daven Mariv before sunset, or even after sunset before it says, especially on Shabbos, they say Birchos Kriya Shema with Baruch. Right? We're going to say a little bit more with Baruch. What?
I was going to say because I was asking about the shofarot and calling out Hadlakat Ner. It didn't make sense to me that the Hadlakat Ner is the third one. I heard it as being the second one.
Okay.
And then there's more malachot that can be done afterwards. Mashma says the Rashba that the Bahag statement that Hadlakat Ner is somehow accepting Shabbat is actually quite perplexing.
Yes, okay. We're going to see this now in the Beis Yosef. He's going to bring this up. So first, let's finish with the tour. Why? Back up. We're saying that Mariv is accepting Shabbos according to Chazal. That's the way Chazal always had it, right? That's their way of always explaining it. Later, you have ideas that other things are a form of accepting Shabbos because they're connected to Mariv. So because they're saying Birchos Kriya Shema, which start with Baruch, so Baruch became the beginning of when they say Shabbos. And that's what you have in Shulchan Aruch and other places. Once the Kila says Baruch, everybody's accepted Shabbos. Chazal would have said Mariv. They say Baruch, fine. And then you have Achronim say, sing Lichadodi, you're saying Mizmor Shir Yom Shabbos, that's Kabbalah Shabbos. That's all perfectly valid because it's done at the right time. But because Mariv can only be from Plag and on, accepting Shabbos can only be from Plag and on. Okay, but you mentioned Bahag. Let's first see what the Torah says. That's Reish Samech Aleph, what I just read from the Torah. And in Reish Samach Gimel, he says, Lo Yemaher Ladliko, Mibaod Yom, Beod Hayom Gadol, She'az Eno Nikar Shemadliko Lefot Shabbos, V'gam Lo Yacher. Like Rashi. He says, you can't light your Shabbos candles too early while it's still Od Hayom Gadol, which means very much Friday, because then it's not Nikar, whereas Rashi used the Aramaic term Minkara. But you also can't do it too late for obvious reasons, because then it's a malach, or you're not allowed to do it. So what's the cutoff point according to Rashi and the Torah? The Torah is following the Rush, by the way, and the Rambam. What's the real halachic cutoff point for lighting Shabbos candles at the earliest time? They don't mention plag ever. They just say not too early, so it's not min kara. Understand? Mm-hmm. Not too early. It has to be min kara. Like I said, nowadays we have a huge leeway, because if you go over to the locker and actually light the Shabbos candles there, you only do that once a week for Shabbos. So I would even suggest this is good enough to say that if you'd light Shabbos candles 3:00 in the afternoon, for whatever purpose, even though you're not benefiting at all from that light, then it's already minkara that this is Lefot Shabbos, just like you're putting up the blech at 3:00.
How do we know that?
Because you never light candles ever, especially your Shabbos locker. Does my wife light candles around the house ever? Does anybody's wife?
I'm assuming one would light candles only when it gets dark enough for them to.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's the other thing. It has to be within reason. We're going to see Rabbi Kiva. Thank God we're going to finish with Rabbi Kiva Eger, who says everything that makes total sense. Okay.
Would be proud.
Here, the Beis Yosef at Reit Samach Gimel, the Beis Yosef brings up the Bahag. The Bahag said, something which, like you said, is difficult. The Beis Yosef rejects this based on the Rishonim and Gemaras and Diukim. The Bahag said lighting Shabbos candles is basically Kabbalah Shabbos. He says, Kasaf Bahag, the Kabbalah Shabbos Teluya Bad Lakas Aner. Now, I can understand Bahag putting, I guess, seeing the association. Why? Lighting the candles is the last thing in Mishnah times and Talmudic times. Lighting Shabbos candles was the last thing you did before Shabbos came in. Right? Yeah. So for many people, that was it. So he just made the jump saying that's the act of Kabbalah Shabbos. And he points out here, I put this in red for those looking on the screen, says the Rush wrote in the end of Perek Bamem Alikin, it's mashma for the Gemara that Kabbalah Shabbos has nothing to do with Hadlakas Haner. Most importantly, because Hadlakas Haner is a malacha. How could you start saying I'm officially taking in Shabbos through the act of desecration of Shabbos? Yeah.
Because it's the last one.
It's the last one. And then afterwards you accept Shabbos. Okay, but still.
Exactly.
But Chazal never said such a thing.
No, because I remember hearing similar arguments that, it's better to say the bracha after lighting the candles, because
that's what they go into here.
Like
that's the thing. Did you read this Beis Yosef? It's a long one.
The whole thing's still discussed to this.
The Beis Yosef. This is the Beis Yosef Shita. Shulchan Aruch Shita is accepting Shabbos is lahalacha mariv. Teluya b'tfilas arvis mida amar b'tfilas shachar v'chulei. It's in that parak there. V'chein amad devar k'shechazan omer baruch hu hakol parshim imlacha. The minhag Yisrael is you say baruch hu. Chazan says baruch hu. Everybody, that's a sign that Mariv starting. So that's when Shabbos starts. And he brings up other Rishonim over here. V'chein kasav Ri bin Chabib shedivrei ha'omrim b'adlachas ner Shabbos lo havya Kabbalah ikar. Okay, he pointed out accepting lighting Shabbos is not the ikar Kabbalah Shabbos. I also have a thing over here that the Ram, I think this is it's in the Hagos. He says, is that the Maram in Rotenberg? I forget who. Hinhig v'tziva last knows kodem she'aldik she'enu mikabel Shabbos ad she'asir miyado haner she'likbo. There's sort of a compromise position. You have to make a t'nai. I'm not accepting Shabbos until I'm finally done dealing with these candles. Some people use a patila to light. Nowadays, it's the equivalent of a match. Something that was on fire, they used to light the other candles, so they're putting it out and they're extinguishing that. If you accept Shabbos, you can't extinguish it. So you have to make it tonight that you're only going to be actually accepting Shabbos once you're done with this lighting aspect.
I'm sorry. I want to derail this whole conversation. I just thought
please don't. Yeah,
if someone has in mind, this is their ritual for before Shabbat, and they're taking upon themselves to take on Shabbat doing this, even if it's something way more arbitrary, let alone lighting candles. That might as well be a Kabbalah
Yeah,
Shabbat,
you could.
no?
Yes, just like saying Mizmor Shir Yom Shabbos Lichadodi or Baruch Hu became.
So what are we discussing? What's the difference between doing that and RV?
Why am I discussing this? I'm trying to.
Like, it's basically whatever you want it to be. The Kabbalah is whatever you want.
Oh, okay. My point is, Mariv. You can't say I want Mariv. I don't have a choice with Mariv. Okay, Mariv is Shabbos according to Chazal. You daven Mariv, that you can't say, but I'm doing daven Mariv all tonight. That's not Shabbos. You can create something else. And Bahag was trying to say, no, lighting candles becomes Shabbos. If lighting candles is the act of accepting Shabbos, then you are now linking the act of lighting candles with a certain time on the clock.
Oh, that's
Plag. You understand? Just like Mariv is connected to a time on the clock, and Mariv cannot precede Plag, then lighting Shabbos candles, if that is Kabbalah Shabbos, cannot be before Plag. That's where we get this idea, which I'm trying to show is not the case. First of all, because the Shulchan Aruch and the Rishonim did not hold the Bahag that lighting candles is Kabbalah Shabbos. But if you link the two, if you link lighting candles to Kabbalah Shabbos, at least by default, they're saying you have to have a tonight that it's not Kabbalah Shabbos. But still, once you link the two, Kabbalah Shabbos with lighting candles, then you suddenly have a cutoff time. You have the earliest time for lighting candles and not before Plag. You can't light candles that say Mincha Ketana. You understand? Good. So that's an important point. And I'm trying to say that the earlier Rishonim who didn't hold like the Hag, okay, certainly from just a mashma of the Gemara, Rambam. Let's just look at Rambam, Rush, Tur, and Rashi in that order, in that reverse order. Chronological order, it would be Rashi, Rambam, Rush, and Tur, who didn't have such a line. They did not link Shabbos candles lighting thereof necessarily with accepting Shabbos, but as just another thing that you do before Shabbos. Culturally, yes, it's one of the last things you do, but it is not accepting Shabbos, and therefore it shouldn't be linked with Plag, but rather the earliest time you can light Shabbos candles is Minkara, Nikar. Okay, the Tur, there's more Tur over here. The Tur is in Reish Samech Zayin, mentions that they try to light Shabbos candles, but Odayom Gadol Haya Nidmeh Lehem Erev. If you lived in, it says Tiveria. So what's the problem with Tiveria? They have mountains to the west. To the east of Tiveria is one of the lowest points on earth. It's called the Kinneret. To the west of the city, and now where the city is actually climbing that slope, it's mostly mountains. So if you're sitting in the old city of Tiveria, you basically miss the sun the last hour of the day. So it's kind of hard to tell when sundown is. The problem is a lot of sages lived in Tiveria, right? Mm-hmm. That was a major population center in the 2nd century. So what do we have here? It says Pershua Tosfos Shemi Plaga Minchu Lamala Yochud Laldik Ner Lakabel Shabbos Bisfios Arvis. That's the linkage. Tosfos says once it's Plag, you can light your candles and accept Shabbos with what? Tfilas Arvis. Okay. Why is Plag the time here? Because that's when it's Mariv time. Now you can accept candles. Your Kabbalah Shabbos can happen with lighting candles because now you can light daven Mariv. That's what Tosfos has said. Like Rabbi Bar-Hayim's been emphasizing, and just sent me a message about this. Okay, he said you have to make sure if you're going to be davening Mariv before it says, which is many times, there's no point of saying Kriya Shema with its brachas. Like the Mishnah Berurah points out, you go to here's saying I'll surprise my father with this one.
Shulchan Aruch still seems to.
I know Shulchan Aruch does this, but the Mishnah Berurah mentions, Daddy, the old minhag. If you are in a shul, let's say, I don't know, Avas Yisrael in Kew Gardens Hills, the 2nd Shabbos of March, at their early Shabbos minyan, and they've accepted Shabbos now, and it's only 6 p.m., and the sun's not going to go down for a while, and they're davening Mariv early for Shabbos, they really shouldn't be saying Baruch Hu and Kriya Shema. So the Mishnah Berurah, the Chavetz Chaim, recommended for those in the know, just do like the old thing, just be quiet while everybody else is saying Shema and not actually doing anything. At best, they're saying Shema, and they'll have to say do the whole mitzvah over again after the stars come out. And at worst, they're saying a bracha of Atala, blessings in vain because they just don't. So how did Mariv look? Well, we had a minyan like this. How does Mariv look? We've done this a few times. If Mariv is before it says, like on an early Shabbos, you just say Mizmor Shir Yom Shabbos or something, Bameh Likin, Kaddish, Shmona Esrei. Okay. That's what it should look like.
That's what I did actually. I walked in and they were right about to start davening, so I just said it. I didn't say Shema.
Okay. Now the Tur is going to say something over here that if a person lights Shabbos candles and accepts Shabbos at Plag, he says this isn't a violation of Lo Yaktim. Remember, it says don't do it too early. Rav Yosef in the Saba is teaching, right? Don't do it too early. It's not too much of akdama. It's around then he's accepting Shabbos. Okay, so he's actually making a connection. Don't light your candles too long before you accept Shabbos somehow. That's something that the Torah is introduced. Either way, we found that there's a connection here in Tosfos between candle lighting, accepting Shabbos, and because accepting Shabbos can only be with plag, so we have an earliest time for lighting candles. The Shulchan Aruch in Bar-Hayim, Reish Samech Aleph, basically, he says a lot that we've seen before. He says you have to light your candles before nighttime. So there's a Haggah. Let me read it to you here. He talks about Tosefes Shabbos. What's according? Remember, the Shulchan Aruch is already holding Rabbeinu Tam's definitions of these things, but the Shulchan Aruch says if you want to do Tosefes Shabbos, it has to be before Bein Hashmashos and before the halachic shkia. He just has different definitions of those that were from what we're using. But the point is, Tosefes Shabbos is before shkia and Bein Hashmashos, right? So he says, "V'imrotzu laktimu kabel of Shabbat miplaga mincha ve'elach harashuth biado." Sorry, read the wrong thing. That's what the Ramah says. You can accept Shabbos from Plaga Mincha and on. Makes sense. Why? Because Plaga Mincha is the earliest you could have done Mar. So in Chazal's way of doing this, Plaga Mincha was the first possible Shabbos. The Shulchan Aruch continues, Mi she'enu bakir b'shurzeh yalik be'oda she'ashemesh b'rosh halin. When should one light Shabbos candles if he doesn't know how to tell when the sun's setting? Light when the sun's at the tops of the trees. The Shulchan Aruch, who held of Rabbeinu Tam's halachic sunset, still recommends that better play it safe, light the candles when the sun's still quite visible. And if it's cloudy, he gives usual simanim. Look for the way the chickens are roosting, or look at the behavior of the ravens, the orvim, right? The crows, whatever it is. And he says, Achar niyaf barchu, afal pisha dain yomhu, ein marvinu ein tomnim. Once they said barchu, then you can't do anything else. It's Shabbos for everybody. And he also says, for us, Mizmor Shil Yom HaShabbos is like Baruch Hu. When did that become the thing? That's already a minhag in Gaonim times in some places. Just really caught on, right? Okay. In Reish Samech Gimel, he says, Lo yakdimu maher ladliko be'odayam gadol she'az eno nikar she'madliko l'chod Shabbat. Can't light your Shabbos candles too early because then what? It's eno nikar. Once again, the Shulchan Aruch standard of how early you can light your candles. V'gam lo yacher v'im rotzeh la'alik ner be'od yom ha'gadol kol Shabbat miyad rashai ki kevan shebekavel of Shabbat miyad ein zo hakdama. He says here, you do it early enough. If it's already the time you can accept Shabbos, that's certainly not called hakdama. Uvad she yehei miplaga mincha l'mala shusha revia kodem alayla. So now the Shulchan Aruch is actually attaching the two. Well, you don't like that he attached the two, plaga mincha.
No.
Okay.
I was distracted by something actually.
So he says here, uvilvad, maybe he's talking about not the candle lighting, but accepting Shabbos. Accepting Shabbos has to be by plag and on. Okay. So there's a Mishnah Berurah over here, which is good. This Mishnah Berurah says what we're trying to say. Mishnah Berurah says it, but then there's a Be'er Locha that seems to contradict it. Okay. So if you want, you could actually see a Mishnah Berurah. I recommend looking at this inside, not just to have it. There's a whole bunch of Mishnah Berurah Chelik Gimels over there. Okay, so this is something that's worth seeing inside. Maybe I'm wrong. And I'll also put Rabbi Kiva Eger on the screen. Well, we'll take a break while we're getting that, so I can bring it here. I don't want to get disconnected. Chelik Gimel. Let's see this. I want to put this on the screen. They have a good printing of Rabbi Kiva Eger. Here. Okay, so let's see this Mishnah Berurah over here. Mishnah Berurah Reish Samech Gimel. Okay. We'll give the exact one. It's on page. It's where the Shulchan Aruch says Lo Yakdim Lemahir. Okay. You see it? What's the exact sif? What page? You have it? Okay, it's Dalid. Page 71. Okay, Lamed Vav and Aleph for page 71, according to Roman numerals. right in the middle of the Shulchan Aruch. So that's what the Shulchan Aruch says. You see it? It says page 70 on the right, so it would be page 71. Right in the middle of 71 of the Shulchan Aruch, that's the top things. So the Mishnah Berurah comments on Be'od Hayom Gadol. Should be right here. Okay? It says here, Hainu Kishahu Zman Harbei Kodem Tosefes Shabbos. Lighting Shabbos candles is not right when it's Zman Harbei before the time of Tosefes Shabbos. The earliest Tosefes Shabbos is Plaga Mincha. So if it's too far before Plaga Mincha, that's not proper. Right? Uzman Tosefes Shabbos Shulchan Aruch Umat Kodem Sof Ashkia. Okay. That's his definition, but I'm just saying that we'd all agree to the idea that you have to do this. Ulamala. Aval Kodem Plaga Mincha Ein Kabbalah To Kabbalah. Af B'diavad. Person accepts Shabbos before Plag, that's nothing. The earliest you could possibly accept Shabbos is Plag. What's the latest you can let out Shabbos, by the way? Halachically speaking, you do Tosefes Shabbos on the night side, so you go keep Shabbosing like those Hasidic Rebbe's well after Tzeis. When do you have to say like Tachlis? Shabbos came to an end already, just like Shabbos happened to you. Even if you say I'm not accepting Shabbos early, sunset, now it's Shabbos. When is it? No, there's no more Tosefes Shabbos.
Well, one has to say weekday on the 8th.
Yeah.
Which the latest time to say that is before but
yeah.
Really Chatzot.
Yeah, but no, Chatzot is just the thing. Chazal told you you have to make sure daven. Really, you can continue Shabbosing. You can even daven Mariv, Motzei Shabbos before Shalosh Shuddis. Okay? You could daven just like you could daven Mariv Shabbos early on Friday. The Chazal say, and the halacha is you could daven Motzei Shabbos Mariv early. It doesn't destroy Shabbos. You still have to say Havdalah, and you have to say Havdalah Bisman, and you also will have to continue keeping Shabbos. Just the Mariv aspect you got out of the way.
So you're asking, when is the latest time?
Well, one has to wear tefillin the next day.
So it's basically until all those. You can continue your Shabbosing, okay? Tosefes Shabbos basically until all those. Okay, that's the last practical time. Okay, no one does that. That'd be insane. But there are people, like I said, there are places in, let's say, Alaska, where Shabbos is out at 11 p.m. There, people go to sleep, before, Havdalah and everything, and they say Havdalah when they wake up in the morning. Okay? So the Mishnah Berurah says here, Mi ba'od hayom gadol, afilu, here's the ikar, afilu im haya achar plaga mincha. Okay? Even if it's after plaga mincha. Umar shel daluk linyan acher. He says here, read what the Haggah says. Go back up into the Shulchan Aruch, the Ramah. Ramah says, first of all, see what Reish Samach Zayin. What does it say in Reish Samach Zayin? I put it into my edition over here. It says, that quote from Tosfos. For Plaga Mincha, that's when you could light candles and Kabbalah Shabbos through davening Mariv, and then you could eat. Notice that. Davening Mariv is what makes it Kabbalah Shabbos. But then people got it that, you could daven Mariv, or you could light candles, but that's what makes it Shabbos. Okay? Let's say the candle was lit well before Shabbos. He had candles burning since Friday morning, since Thursday night. So what does he do? So it says here that when Shabbos is coming in, he should put it out and relight the candles. Make sense? Why? That way it's minkara. And what is this like? This is a passive mitzvah. I'll give you a brisker hakira. Mitzvah bir chametz. Now you remember this one? Mitzvah bir chametz is the mitzvah that one not have chametz come the cutoff point, or that he actively get rid of whatever leaven he has around the house. Nafkamina is one has no chametz in his house. He's a yeshiva guy. The only food he ever gets is whatever they feed him in the yeshiva, chadar ochel, and he happens not to have any bread or any food whatsoever. It's Erev Pesach. Should he somehow find some flour and water and mix the two into a dough so that he has something chametz to burn at the right time? Or is he totally fine because he has no chametz to get rid of? Good. So now we can understand this. So my question is, Shabbos candles, is the mitzvah that you're supposed to have candles burning? Or you have to go and light candles? So there has to be a minkara aspect. So the Ramah is saying, if you had your candles, all the lights are on, comes Shabbos time, so you got to really specifically turn them all off and turn them back on, extinguish the candle and turn it on, so you could show that this is for Shabbos. So Minkara says, yeah, do that. That's what the Ramah is saying. So the Mishnah Berurah says, hidlik l'tzorech Shabbos, af shelo kibul av Shabbos ba'ad lakato. let's say a person lit the candles for Shabbos. The purpose was for Shabbos. The Odayom Gadol. But he didn't accept Shabbos through lighting these candles. Right? He lit them l'shem Shabbos. Okay? Comes Plaga Mincha, Mishnah Berurah says, he doesn't have to now extinguish these candles and relight them just to show now they're for Shabbos, because he originally lit them for Shabbos. He shouldn't have lit them so darn early. He shouldn't have lit them at 3 p.m. But if he had lit them at 3 p.m. for Shabbos, by 3 p.m., I'm exaggerating, saying well before Shabbos, well before Plag. 3 p.m. is usually Mincha Katana time. Mishnah Berurah is saying here, if he lit them for Shabbos, Mincha for Shabbos, he doesn't have to then go and relight them later in the day to show that they're specifically for Shabbos. If they were lit not for Shabbos so far early, then yes, he should relight them, extinguish and relight. See that difference? Okay. Shabbos shop your dummy. Okay. B'diavad shop your dummy. B'diavad. B'diavad, he lit the Shabbos candles way early. He doesn't have to go and put them out after Plag and relight them just to show it's for Shabbos, because he lit them for Shabbos originally Friday afternoon or Friday morning even. And he calls this b'diavad. By the way, I'd like to add shasat chak k'diavad dummy. If a person's in shasat chak. What was the cases that came up? There was a fellow who's on Mishmar. For whatever reason, he has to do all his Shabbos preparations well before Shabbos, because he's only going to come back to his house on Shabbos. There's always some guy at the Hatzalah dispatcher base who's there around candlelighting time. So, and also soldiers who are in a situation, doctors on certain, they're 8-hour shifts in the hospital, sometimes 12-hour shifts, and the nurses also. Many of them have to prepare for Shabbos because Shabbos is coming in right in the middle of their shift. So all their Shabbos preparations at home are already done well beforehand, right? And they're going to come home to the house on Shabbos at 9 p.m. So it's all ready. So those people are Shasat Chak, Diavadami. If they lit their Shabbos candles at 3 p.m. before they start their shift, so the Mishnah Berurah is pointing out that that's fine. Or another case, a person who just has to leave the house, they like to light Shabbos candles, taking Shabbos at Plag. But today they're going to have to light Shabbos candles half an hour before Plag. No other chance. So go right ahead. That's what the Mishnah Berurah is pointing out here, because there is no actual halacha that says the earliest time for lighting Shabbos candles is Plag. The only question is, what can you do to make it nikar, that you're lighting for Shabbos? There's a Bar halacha, which I can recommend other people read, because he makes a distinction here that is kind of weird, where it seems to contradict. Maybe I'm reading it wrong, so we won't go into that. But I will read you what Rabbi Akiva Eiger says. I'll close with this. So I'll send the notes. You could do this. Let me put on Rabbi Akiva Eiger, and then we'll ask the question. Okay, the 50 point question. Hold on a second. See, technology is not my friend here. Also, if we get disconnected in Zoom, just reconnect. Okay.
Chat GPT help with this field?
Of course not. Why would I use Chat GPT? What?
It was used before.
I was doing that because I was asked to experiment with it. But no. Besides, it wasn't Chat GPT, it was some other AI. It was the Rabot or something like that. Okay. Here's the Rabbi Akiva Eiger over here. On the same topic that the Ramah said, Haner Doluk mi bod yom. The Ramah gave the case. Candles are burning all Friday, right? So he recommends putting out the candles, relighting them to show it's for Shabbos. Rabbi Akiva Eiger says something wonderful. Hainu sheya doluk li inyan acher. The candles in the house were burning what? For some other purpose, not Shabbos. Kevan de lo hayad lakal Shabbos, because they originally weren't lit for Shabbos. Okay, sarich lachzor chabot ulachzor uhadlika. Extinguish them. He should extinguish them, or he has to. Sarich has to extinguish them and relight them for the sake of Shabbos. Letzorech Shabbos. Ella, Aval. Ima loka haya letzorech Shabbos. Well before Shabbos candles are burning on Friday, but for Shabbos purposes, right? Ima loka, this really early candlelighting was before Tzorech Shabbos, okay? Ella shelik be'od hayom gadol, lit it be'od hayom gadol, well into Friday. Ein tzorech lechaboto, he doesn't have to put it out. Ela lechatchila lo yadlik kolkach mikodem. Okay, lechatchila he shouldn't have lit them so early, but after the fact, his Shabbos candles are burning well before Shabbos. That's fine. Sheino nikar shemadiko lechvod Shabbos. Okay, why shouldn't he lit them so early? Because then it's not nikar. He didn't achieve nikar. Aval diavad shop your dummy, just like the Mishnah Berurah quotes him as saying. Okay, but diavad shop your dummy. Umasha katav tosvos, where it says in Tosvos Kedatanya, uvad shelo yakdim, when Tosvos says don't do too early. Hainu demizem mashma da mitzvah ein rak sheyelo Shabbos ner daluk. Okay, the mitzvah isn't that he should just have candles burning on Shabbos. Ella the mitzvah laka atzmo tzorach Shabbos. You actually have to do an act of lighting to show it's for Shabbos. Okay? Okay? That's why it's proper that the actual act be done for Shabbos. You can't say, well, my candles are burning since Thursday night. I'm just not going to put them out. Shabbos is coming. So now it's Tzorach Shabbos. No, you should have an act to show that's for Shabbos. It all depends. Do you light it for Shabbos or not? If you lit it for Shabbos well before Shabbos, so it's still okay. So there you go. I was about to close the computer. The point is, I think it's very clear from the Gemara and the Rishonim, and what the Mishnah Berurah brings here, what Rabbi Akiva Eiger says, he basically says it explicitly. If you're stuck in a situation where you need to light your Shabbos candles well before Plaga Mincha, so that's fine. As long as your active lighting is for the sake of Shabbos. So here's my question. Okay, the fact that we use electric lights all the time. So her act of specifically lighting Shabbos candles, isn't that minkara enough? Okay. I would think that nowadays, because I never light candles. I was mentioning this before. If my wife were to go and light Shabbos candles at 2:00 in the afternoon tomorrow, there is no other reason for lighting those candles except for Shabbos. We don't need it, and we never light candles except when it's Shabbos time. So isn't that minkara enough? And the answer is, yeah, that's such a strong kasha that the ikar is electric lights anyways. Shabbos candles is entirely symbolic nowadays. Unless you have a crazy blackout or something like that. But for most of us, we never had until that Tu B'Av blackout back in 2003, I think it was. Was it 2003? Yeah, it was the Tu B'Av blackout of 2003, a Thursday afternoon blackout, when that was the first time we ever experienced some sort of power outage in New York, right? I never had something in my entire life. I was an adult then, and it has there ever been? There, okay. Before that, a generation.
November something. Yeah.
Okay, November. Yes, that was like ancient times, And that was when my father used to ride a dinosaur to school, So, but that was well before I was born. Oh, is that? Oh my. Okay, fine. But you understand, 77, it's a generational thing. We don't have this, okay? So electric lights, and I'll give you an nafkamina. Someone who lights 2 candles around his house, 2 candles at a lachter, Baruch Hashem, he has a nice big house, just 2 candles, it says, oh, this is the mitzvah Shabbos. He has not done what the sages wanted to. That's not going to really help him. He's going to be tripping over himself, and he's not going to be able to have his meal. Whereas one who doesn't light the 2 symbolic tea lights he gets from the Chabad girls at the central bus station, has his lights on around the house normally, the electric lights, has done what the sages wanted. Okay? So there is an afkamina. And also, no lighting candles. There's certain places you can't light candles. I remember I tried to sneak in some candles to my wife who was stuck in the hospital over Yom Kippur. She gave birth right before Yom Kippur. So remember, Rabbi Soloveitchik in New York said, no, you don't do that. The hospital has, turn on your light. The ikar is the electrical lights that you have in your house. And then minkara. So certainly the question is, why even lighting candles? So that's a strange thing. Obviously, if a person lighting candles is minkara. And the last thing I always say about lighting Shabbos candles is, if you're one of those people who I mentioned, for whatever reason, you got to be out of the house. You're the medical professional, you're the soldier. You do all your Shabbos preparations like a good boy at 2 p.m., and then you're gone and you're coming home at 10 p.m. Do not light Shabbos candles and leave them unattended. That is a sin. That is forbidden. Lighting Shabbos candles or other candles around the house and leaving them unattended is a bigger sin than lighting candles on Shabbos, which is Chil Shabbos. Chil Shabbos, yes, there's skila. It's one of the worst sins in the Torah. But endangering life and limb, especially those of others, is the worst sin possible. Shvichus damim. Shvichus damim is the worst of them all. Okay? It's also an Isser Skila. So don't do that. No, actually, no. Certain Shvichus damim is not Skila. But it's still really bad, like the Rambam says. Okay? Certain murderers are put to death in other ways, right? Not just Skila. Yeah. Yeah. No. Yeah. Yeah, negligent shvichus damim is a pretty bad thing, especially if you were warned not to and you could have avoided it. There's a lot that, for example, is not punished by Beis Din down here, but it doesn't mean that, free pass, right? There is a diamond in this thing, so that's it.
We would like to encourage our viewers to share these videos with friends and send in your responses. If you would like to obtain Birkon Nusach Eretz Yisrael or invite the rabbi for a speaking engagement, please email us at office@machonshilo.org.